They dropped a steel container right on top of my 150-year-old stone fence dead center like it belonged there. And 2 days later, I get this violation notice in my mailbox. Not for them. For me. Apparently, I was obstructing community development. No knock on the door, no warning, just a printed letter with a fancy seal like I was some trespasser on my own land. Maybe they figured I wouldn't fight over a few inches of dirt. Yeah. They figured wrong. I hadn't even unpacked all my boxes. Moved to Westridge Hollow just 6 months ago, left behind a bakery I ran for 15 years in Milwaukee after my uncle passed and left me his ranch. 40 acres, an old weathered barn, some creaky floorboards and that stone fence. That fence had outlived every house in this county, I swear. It wasn't just a border. It was memory. It was legacy. I didn't come here looking for trouble. Just wanted some quiet. But turns out, quiet has a way of turning into all-out war when an HOA smells an opportunity. The day I saw that thing, that giant, military-grade shipping container sitting on top of my fence like some alien pod had crash-landed overnight, I almost dropped my coffee. I stood there in my slippers, squinting at it, thinking maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone was gonna swing by and say, "Oops, wrong lot." But nothing. No note. No workers. Just this steel beast glaring back at me like it owned the place. So I called the HOA office. Straight to voicemail. Drove down there, and that's when I met her, Miranda Carlisle. President of the HOA. Real estate agent. Clipboard warrior. Hair like she'd stepped out of a shampoo commercial. She looked me up and down like I was selling knockoff watches at her front door. "Mr. Beckett," she said, flipping through a binder thicker than the King James Bible, "the container falls under our beautification initiative. It's compliant with Section 14 of the Development Charter. Beautification. On my fence." I showed her photos, boundary lines, even pulled out my uncle's records. The woman didn't blink. "We're talking about inches," she said. "Surely you're not the kind of man who lets sentiment halt progress." I walked out before I said something that'd land me on the evening news. But that was the moment I knew this wasn't some oversight. This was the start of a campaign. Back at home, I told my neighbor, Arthur Lane. Retired land surveyor. Mounds sharper than a nail. He looked at the fence, ran his hand over the stone, and said, "That's pioneer work. They knocked that down, they're not just building theory erasing. We got to dig in. Records, maps, anything." My uncle was a pack rat, kept everything. And deep in his files, the land deed from 1871. And drawn. Signed. Sealed. It showed the fence at 3 feet inside my legal boundary. But here's where it gets better. I also found groundwater rights. Turns out, I own the well that half the neighborhood taps into for their sprinklers and koi ponds. Guess who didn't file for access? While I'm chewing on that bombshell, Arthur says, "You might want to check who signed off on the container permit." So I do. And surprise, Miranda's real estate company shares an address with the HOA office. She's renting out these shipping containers to developers, using HOA land to stage materials for private jobs, and charging maintenance crews to the HOA books while pocketing the difference. I'm staring at a one-woman empire built on shady deals and fake smiles. That's when Diana enters the picture. Former HOA treasurer. Got booted for non-compliance, whatever that means. She hands me a flash drive like she's passing state secrets. Turns out, she kind of was. Duplicate invoices, padded expenses, HOA funds funneled into Miranda's private remodels. It was corruption in heels, wrapped in legalese. And as soon as I started poking around, boom, sudden violations hit my mailbox like clockwork. Grass too long. Porch light too bright. flower box out of alignment. One letter even claimed my property was a structural hazard. She was trying to bleed me dry and force me out. But pressure doesn't break me. It makes me mean. I got systematic. GPS mapped the property line. Scanned and labeled every document. Flew a drone over the lot and caught her workers loading materials from that container into vans with her business logo. I had timestamps, license plates, the works. Then came the wild card. Nina Torres, local journalist, calls me. Said she's been chasing HOA abuse stories, and my neighborhood keeps popping up. I hand her the files. She smiles like a kid at Christmas. She's toast, she says. That Monday morning at 9 a.m., I submitted the full dossier to the county attorney, the state auditor, and the Department of Water Resources. By 9:10, Nina publishes her piece. By 9:30, investigators knock on Miranda's office door. She showed up at my place like thunder, furious, but this time, she wasn't met with fear. She was met with badges. The container. Hauled off by 6 p.m. The fence. Declared a protected historic structure. Miranda. Resigned by week's end. Now she's facing charges for misappropriation, trespassing, and water theft. The HOA got gutted. New board, new bylaws. Transparency, community votes, the whole 9 yards. Arthur and I. We throw Sunday cookouts by the fence now. The same kids who used to avoid me play tag in my yard. The land's still mine. Still standing. Like it has since 1871. But this story. It's not just about property lines or HOA drama. It's about the quiet erasure of history, of memory, by people who think power gives them the right to decide what matters. That stone fence isn't just rock and mortar. It's who we were and who we still are if we fight for it. And here's the twist: folks who wouldn't make eye contact when Miranda ran the show. They stop by now. Drop off pie. Ask about my tomatoes. One guy even said, "Didn't think you'd last, but I'm glad you did." Last week, the town put up a bronze plaque next to the fence. Just a small one. It reads, "In honor of those who preserve what matters." Simple words, but they hit me like a freight train. Because sometimes, that's all it takes: one person refusing to back down to remind everyone else what's worth keeping. So yeah, when someone tries to erase your story inch by inch, stone by stone, you don't just let them. You dig in. You push back. And if you do it right, your story becomes part of the land itself. Now it's your turn. What would you have done? Is this about fences or something deeper? Legacy, justice, standing your ground. Drop a comment. Let's talk about it.